Students, let me describe the alternation of generation. Alternation of generation in Bryophyta. Actually, it happened in mosses. As you have pre-mindset, there are three basic category of the Bryophyta, that are actually the liverworts, hornworts and mosses. Keep in mind, example of liverworts was the Rixia, Markensia, Pilia, Porella, Sphagnum and Pogonatum. Markensia, Pilia, Porella, Sphagnum and Pogonatum. All about the structure and explanation about the liverworts reproduction is over. Now back to the next, that is hornwort. In hornwort, it is not universal word, but the main example of hornwort is Anthoceras. And now very important terms regarding the Bryophyta is mosses. Mosses are actually well developed Bryophyta than the other liverworts and hornworts. It has the different leaf-like, root-like and stem-like structure, but having no proper root, no proper leaf and no proper structure roots. Keep in mind, that is actually in your syllabus. And the reproduction process in the moss are actually in your syllabus. Basically in moss, they perform the process of reproduction by two ways, that is asexual by means of fragmentation or budding. That is fragmentation or budding means, suppose that this is the main body of the moss, then there is the very little buds appears and this bud detached from the main body and germinate to form the new young one, that is called as budding. And when the body from the typical or from the bottom is cracked and fall down, there will be germination of new moss, and that overall process is actually asexual, either by means of fragmentation and budding. But the basic important terms is alternation of generation. Alternation of generation means half of the Bryophyta, life cycle of half of the Bryophyta complete by means of diploid and rest half will be in form of haploid. It means in the life cycle of Bryophyta, the diploid and haploid life cycle will come after another, and that phenomenon is known as the alternation of generation. That is very important. Notes of this overall terms will deliver you. Now back to the explanation of the life cycle of common Bryophyta. Example of moss is Funaria. Example of moss is Funaria, and that should be in your note. It may be asked the life cycle of Funaria or life cycle of a common Bryophyta or life cycle of a moss. Don't be confused. Now back to the life cycle of common moss or Funaria. Suppose that this is the common main body of Bryophyta, and that consists the capsule. This stem-like structure is known as seta, and that is actually the bottom part, and that is actually known as foot. So basic part of the Bryophyta is divided into foot, seta and capsule. But one interesting fact, the capsule and seta are actually diploid in nature, and that diploid structure is known as sporophyte. Why sporophyte? Because spores will be developed at the typical part of the common Bryophyta, and the foot part, that is the bottom part, this one is the rhizoids, this is the leaf-like structure. So the bottom part is actually the haploid in nature, that is called as gametophyte. It means it is haploid, and sporophyte it is diploid. So the questions may be asked regarding this fact. Name the haploid and diploid parts of the Bryophyta. The haploid parts of Bryophyta is sporophyte, and the diploid part of Bryophyta is actually the gametophyte. Now back to what happened in the capsule. Everything's regarding capsules. Listen carefully. Inside the capsules, many spores are filled, and that spores, suppose that this is the single spores. Inside the spores capsules there are many spores, and this one is the single spores. The spores through the meiosis, as you know, the meiosis give rise the result of haploid cells. the spores filled in the capsule are actually diploid, and by means of meiosis it become many haploid spores, that is haploid spores, and that will happen in the capsule. And that haploid spores are basically two types. The first type is male haploid spores, and second type is the female haploid. This symbol is represent the male and this symbol represent the female, that is actually the female haploid spores. So in the capsule there are two type of spores are formed, the male haploid spores and female haploid spores. This one is the female haploid spores, this one is the male haploid spores. The male and female haploid spores later germinate, it begin to germinate. The male haploid spores and female haploid spores later begin to germinate to form the new young one, and that actually little plantlets of male, and that will be the female. That young plants from the male and female spores is known as protonema. Protonema. Sometimes there is fragmentation or budding. The one protonema give rise to two protonema. There will be same in the male reproductive system, that is male spores. This one is the male protonema, this one is the female protonema. But after the maturity, the female protonema and male protonema develop the two different reproductive and specific part known as antheridium and archegonium. In the male protonema, the very specific organs develop known as archegonium, that is the cup shape archegonium, and that will develop in the male protonema. When the archegonium develop, the male protonema not remain as male protonema, it become male gametophyte. Keep in mind, it is haploid. The haploid spores form the haploid protonema, and haploid protonema form the haploid archegonium. And in the haploid archegonium, the haploid egg cells exist, that is haploid. N means haploid, 2n means diploid, that is haploid egg cell that represent the female gamete. And what happen inside the male protonema? Listen carefully. Male protonema develop very special organs. That organs is known as the antheridium. That organs is known as antheridium. And in the single antheridium, many antherozoids are developed, that is antherozoids. Antherozoids are haploid. Overall antheridium is haploid, that will be haploid. Keep in mind. Then what happen inside the antheridium? The antheridium, when the antherozoids become mature, then it become flagellated. The antherozoids become flagellated. This one is the antherozoids, and it eliminate out from the antheridium, that is this is the antheridium, and it will become burst after the maturity. And each and every antherozoids, this one is the antherozoids released out from the antheridium, and it will now with the help of water it can swim. With the help of water it can swim, and then it will move into the archegonium and fused with the egg cell. Listen carefully. Suppose that this is the archegonium and the root archegonium, the leaf and everything, it is haploid in nature, that is gametophytic in nature. Then what happened? Listen carefully. It is haploid, the archegonium, that is archegonium, it is haploid in nature and gametophytic in nature. And what happened inside the archegonium? Already there is an egg cells. So many antherozoids enter from the tip, but only one will get fused, and that it form the zygote, 2n structure, and zygote later develop into embryo. Embryo earlier remain covered by the calyptra. Calyptra is the covering of embryo, and that embryo will develop to form the this type of structures. So let we introduce how the bottom become gametophyte and top become sporophyte. Listen carefully. The bottom is come from the archegonium, that is actually already gametophyte. It come from the archegonium, so it remain haploid, and at the tip there will be the fusion of male and female, the N and N. There will be the 2N structure that will become diploid, and that later form the sporophytic diploid structure. So that is the overall structure of the life cycle of common Bryophyta. So let make the snapshot or make the screenshot regarding this, and it should be your homework, and the homework and assignment will be delivered soon you. Thank you. But one more things you should know. Listen carefully. From the main body to here there will be the diploid, and from the protonema to the archegonium there will be haploid. It means half of the life cycle of Bryophyta become remain diploid, and half of the Bryophyta become haploid life cycle. That's why the overall life cycle of Bryophyta is known as haplodiplontic life cycle. And in this way the first stage of the life cycle remain diploid, and the intermediate stage become haploid. In this way the haploid and diploid life cycle comes one another. First you can't say the haploid or diploid, means earlier stage remain haploid become and later stage become diploid. It means the haploid and diploid structures comes one after another, यानी कि haploid और diploid structure जो है एक दूसरे के बाद आता रहता है. इस वजह से इस पूरे प्रोसेस को अल्टरनेशन ऑफ जनरेशन कहते हैं. अगर आपसे ये पूछा जाए क्यों इसको अल्टरनेशन ऑफ जनरेशन कहते हैं, तो आपको लिखना पड़ेगा कि बिकॉज दे स्पेंट देयर लाइफ साइकिल इन बोथ गैमेटोफाइट एज वेल एज sporophyte. It means the haploid and diploid. It means haplontic life cycle and diplontic life cycle in Bryophyta comes one after another. That's why the life cycle of Bryophyta called alternation of generation. Listen carefully. अब इसके बारे में कभी कभी पूछा जाता है कि गैमेटोफाइट स्पोरोफाइट ऑफ ब्रायोफाइट. ये ब्रायोफाइटा का क्या है? स्पोरोफाइट. और ये क्या है? ब्रायोफाइटा का गैमेटोफाइट. द स्पोरोफाइट ऑफ ब्रायोफाइट इज हाफ पैरासाइट. इट इज हाफ पैरासाइट. क्यों इसको हाफ पैरासाइट बोला जाता है भाई? अब यहाँ पे देखो ये इतना पोर्शन इस पे डिपेंड है, ये पोर्शन पूरा इस पे डिपेंड है, यानी कि ये फोटोसिंथेसिस के लिए, चूंकि ग्रीन कलर है, फोटोसिंथेसिस के लिए सब कुछ कर सकता है, बट वाटर के लिए टोटली किस पे डिपेंड है? गैमेटोफाइट पे. मतलब 50% काम ये गैमेटोफाइट से करवा रहा है, मीन्स 50% ये डिपेंडेंट है गैमेटोफाइट पे. दैट्स वाई द स्पोरोफाइट ऑफ गैमेटोफाइट कॉल्ड half parasite. Listen carefully. What do you mean by sporophyte? The diploid stage of bryophyte called sporophyte. What do you mean by gametophyte? The haploid stage of haploid stage of bryophyta is called gametophyte. तो ये सब सारी चीजें आपको जानना है. अल्टरनेशन ऑफ जनरेशन, ठीक है. हैप्लोडिप्लॉन्टिक लाइफ साइकिल के नाम से अगर पूछ दे तो भी यही लिखेंगे. अल्टरनेशन ऑफ जनरेशन के बारे में पूछ दे तो भी यही लिखेंगे, ठीक है. तो ये इससे रिलेटेड बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं. यहाँ पे भी आपको यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा क्वेश्चन ये भी पूछता है, द लाइफ साइकिल ऑफ ब्रायोफाइट डू नॉट कंप्लीट एट ड्राई. यानी कि ब्रायोफाइटा का जो लाइफ साइकिल होता है वो ड्राई कंडीशन में कंप्लीट नहीं हो सकता. क्यों? बिकॉज मैंने यही बताया कि एंथेरोजॉइड्स जब एंथेरिडियम से निकल के बाहर आते हैं तो यहाँ पे इनको क्या चाहिए होता है? वाटर. वाटर नहीं है तो ये एंथेरोजॉइड्स निकलने के बाद क्या हो जाएंगे? डेथ कर जाएंगे. दैट्स वाई दे फॉर्म द दैट इज दे रिक्वायर्ड वाटर एज अ मीडियम. तो ये इसी वजह से ब्रायोफाइटा को क्या कहता है? एम्फीबियन ऑफ प्लांट किंगडम. अभी एक और क्वेश्चन पूछता है, व्हाई द नंबर ऑफ एंथेरोजॉइड्स फॉर्म 1000, that is many, while the number of egg cells remain single, that is they are not much as like the एंथेरोजॉइड्स. मेल गैमेट्स ज्यादा बनते हैं, फीमेल गैमेट्स क्यों? अभी यहाँ पे देखो फीमेल गैमेट्स को घर में रहना पड़ता है, ये मोटाइल नहीं है, ये क्या है? नॉन मोटाइल है, तो इसके रिस्क ऑफ डैमेज कम है. और यहाँ पे एंथेरोजॉइड सब के सब क्या होते हैं? मैच्योरिटी के टाइम पे बाहर निकल आते हैं, तो इसके रिस्क ऑफ डैमेज ज्यादा है. सो देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ रिस्क ऑफ डैमेज इन द एंथेरोजॉइड्स to compare than the archegonium. So the number of antherozoids are greater form than the archegonium. तो ये सब सारे क्वेश्चन आपको असाइनमेंट में मिल जाएंगे. कीप इन माइंड. थैंक यू.